Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined this week by energy and environment reporter Jeremy Beaman. Jeremy, we got big news from OPEC-plus, was celebrated by the White House. What are we talking about in terms of what they announced?
OPEC-plus, which, as you know, is the Organization of Petroleum Producing Countries,
Right.
Along with Russia, announced that they will increase their production output for the month, beginning in the month of July, and then in August as well. This is the first time that they've announced a production increase basically since July. So in July, just to set the stage, July of 2021, when demand started sort of coming back and economies started moving out of the pandemic recession, OPEC got together and said, we're going to set a target of 400,000 barrels per day for the month of July. And then they basically returned to that target, increased it a little bit to 432,000 later on, but basically said, we're going to keep our production increase target to that. And so this would mark a sort of shift from that, and then OPEC plus acknowledging that the oil market needs more oil with prices where they are up into well into the $100 per barrel, even $120 per barrel in the last few days.
So obviously the United States has wanted to see this happen for some time. The Biden administration has really been lobbying to try to get production up. What was one of the catalysts? What was one of the big international issues that kind of led to this?
Well, the main one, even though OPEC Plus didn't mention this in their announcement for obvious reasons, Russia is a member of OPEC Plus, so
Right.
they were probably being a little coy maybe. But
Sure.
The big development was the EU basically finally coming to agreement after about a month at least of negotiations to embargo most Russian oil imports. And under the agreement, that would begin by the end of this year. There's some exemptions for pipeline oil, but this would take millions of barrels per day off the market. And so that means European countries will be looking elsewhere for oil because they won't be buying from Russia anymore. So with that, this sort of would mark, again, the embargo hasn't taken effect quite yet. They haven't started turning away ships, but once they do, again, that's a huge amount of demand that the Europeans will be looking to meet on the global market. And so that's sort of a fundamental, will cause a fundamental shift in the market and require more oil from non-Russia producers to sort of meet that and keep the market balanced, which up until basically now, OPEC and the Saudis in particular have said the market is balanced. What we're seeing in terms of prices is happening because of the war in Ukraine, because of sort of what's going on with demand at some level, and that there's not really anything fundamentally underlying in terms of like supply demand imbalance, this surge in prices. But now they're saying we're going to put more oil on the market, sort of envisioning the day when Russian oil will be cut off, basically.
So the Europeans, even though they've been broadly and overwhelmingly aligned with the United States in terms of how to react to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they've been a little divided about how to handle energy-related issues as concerns Russia.
That's right. They did a coal embargo weeks ago.
Right.
The oil embargo effort was a little more difficult, but they came to an agreement. The outstanding issue now is natural gas imports. And leaders, the sort of narrative is the easy things are out of the way.
Right.
You thought oil was going to be hard, just wait until we take on natural gas imports. And so basically several leaders of several EU countries have said an embargo of natural gas is off the table. We just can't afford to do this. It'll send our economies into recession. And so you have some economies like Estonia, smaller countries that don't rely as much, not only on natural gas, but just natural gas in general, who are saying, let's start talking an embargo of natural gas, and larger players saying not yet. So the European Commission has sort of put a target on the table of what they want to do this year. They want to reduce gas demand by 2/3. But it's not sort of to the level of hard commitment as the other embargoes are, and it probably won't get there in the foreseeable future, just because it'd be such a tall order for them, and an economic hit really for them to stop bringing in that gas without alternatives.
Mm-hmm. So closer to home, Republicans have unveiled their climate action plan. It's obviously different than the Biden administration's approach, but it's an attempt to demonstrate Republican seriousness on this issue to attract some voters, younger voters and suburban voters who are concerned about climate. How does it differ from some of the things Democrats want to do, and what really basically is this plan?
Well, it uses some of the same language that Democratic plans do. You know, it talks about emissions reductions and so forth. But the thing that really sets it apart, and it is a counter to Democratic plans. Democrats are frequently talking about climate change. Republicans do not. And I've had members of the Republican members of the House say basically, their fellow Republicans are sort of afraid, honestly, to talk about it. They just have a special aversion to it. So what's really sets this plan apart is that it positively embraces U.S. oil and gas production as sort of an greenhouse gas emissions reducing mechanism. So the idea is we produce more oil and gas here. We have stricter standards here than in, for example, Saudi Arabia, Russia, the other two largest producers in the world. And so the more of our relatively cleaner oil and gas that we produce and put on the market, it's better for emissions reductions and thereby better for climate change. Now, that's sort of a premise that Democrats reject. Even though President Joe Biden and the administration want to see more oil production to help solve this certainly political crisis for them in terms of prices. They've also at the same time maintained that they want to stop producing oil and gas, issuing new leases on federal lands for producing oil and gas, and so. Sort of positively embracing U.S. production is not something Democrats have done, but it's something that could play to Republicans' benefit, because they're on the one hand addressing climate change, whether it's in the best way possible is something for them to debate, of course, but they can say, look, we want to solve this problem, but we also want to produce energy here, and consumers probably largely are saying we need more energy to bring prices down. So they sort of check both of those boxes at once.
So there's obviously a stark difference in approach, and particularly on the issue of domestic production, but is there any common ground that the plan offers potentially with Democrats?
There are some Democrats who have basically asked the administration to do this, to acknowledge that our production is cleaner than Russia's and the Saudis. But those number, 10 and below, I mean, there's some moderates like Joe Manchin, like Mark Kelly, Kyrsten Sinema, I believe, has signed up. Those are in the Senate. There's been some House Republicans too, but they're in the overwhelming minority. And at least among those who have sort of gotten out front on this issue, the larger consensus is sort of what's called a keep it in the ground mentality. There are Democrats who've introduced legislation basically to stop production on federal lands new production on federal lands from happening, new leasing in particular. So those sort of outnumber the more moderate types who want additional production to respond to the price crisis now. So where there is consensus, I think it's at least it's a long shot for there to be a broad consensus on that.
So green issues are still really divided between red and blue.
That's right.
Thank you, Jeremy. You can read Jeremy and subscribe to our Daily on Energy newsletter at washingtonexaminer.com.